There is a tea bowl in a museum in Kyoto that has been broken and repaired 3 times. Each break has been mended with lacquer mixed with gold dust, a technique called Kintsugi, which we have discussed in this series before, but which belongs to the larger philosophical world we are entering today. The cracks are visible, are meant to be visible, are, in the aesthetic judgment of the tradition that produced this bowl, the most beautiful thing about it. Not despite the breaks, because of them. Because the bowl has a history now, a record of what happened to it, of the forces it encountered, of the repairs that were made, and the hands that made them, that the unbroken bowl, perfect in its original form, simply does not have. The unbroken bowl is beautiful, but it is the beauty of potential, of the thing that has not yet been tested, that has not yet encountered the world's roughness and survived it. The broken and repaired bowl is beautiful in a different way entirely. It is the beauty of a life that has actually been lived. This is the entry point into Wabi-Sabi, the Japanese aesthetic philosophical tradition developed across centuries of Zen Buddhist influence and refined most precisely in the culture of the tea ceremony, that finds in the imperfect, the impermanent, the incomplete, and the weathered not the absence of beauty, but its most honest form. Most of the world is trying to achieve the unbroken bowl. Wabi-Sabi is the philosophy of the bowl that has been broken and repaired with gold. We live inside an aesthetic that has made perfection the standard and imperfection the problem. Not just visually, though visually the culture has never been more explicit about this, with the digital tools that allow the removal of every line, every asymmetry, every piece of evidence that the face being presented has been anywhere near the experience of being alive. But philosophically, the career that should have gone further, the relationship that should have been different, the body that should still be what it was at 35, the life that has, in its actual unfolding, departed from the version that was planned, in ways that the person living it has been quietly, persistently, completely automatically treating as failures of the original design. Wabi-Sabi looks at this aesthetic, at the entire cultural project of achieving and maintaining the perfect, the unmarked, the pristine, and offers a counter-proposition so simple and so complete that it takes a lifetime to actually absorb. The imperfection is not the problem to be solved. The imperfection is the record, the evidence of encounter, the mark of a thing that has been somewhere. And the life that bears its marks honestly, that does not try to restore the original surface, that does not pretend the breaks did not happen, that allows the history of the encounters to be visible in the texture of what remains, is not a lesser life than the life that managed to stay unbroken. It is a truer one. The word wabi-sabi is not a single concept, but 2 joined. Wabi originally meant the misery of living alone in nature, far from civilization, the cold, the poverty, the specific bleakness of the hermit's life. Over centuries, the meaning transformed. By the time of the great tea masters of the 15th and 16th centuries, wabi had become something almost opposite to its origin, the beauty found in simplicity, in rusticity, in the plain and unadorned, in the specific quality of a space or an object that has been reduced to what it actually is, without decoration or pretension. Sabi originally meant loneliness or desolation, the feeling of time passing, of things aging, of the melancholy that attaches itself to impermanent things in their impermanence. And Sabi, too, transformed, became in the aesthetic tradition the beauty of the aged, the weathered, the patinated,
the specific loveliness of the thing that has been changed by time and wears the change without apology. Together, Wabi-Sabi, the beauty of the simple and the imperfect, the aesthetic that sees in the rough tea bowl, the asymmetrical garden, the moss-covered stone, the face that has accumulated its years, not the failure to achieve the ideal, but the presence of something the ideal cannot contain. The ideal is static. Wabi-Sabi is alive. The ideal is the bowl before it has been anywhere. Wabi-Sabi is the bowl that has been places. To understand Wabi-Sabi fully, you need to understand the world it developed in opposition to. In 16th century Japan, the dominant aesthetic of the aristocracy and the warrior class was one of elaborate display, of lacquered surfaces, gold leaf, formal symmetry, the demonstration of wealth and power through the perfection and expense of the objects that surrounded the powerful. The tea ceremony, as it was being developed and refined by the master Sen no Rikyū, was a deliberate counter-aesthetic. Not poverty performance. The tea bowls Rikyū preferred were simple, irregular, often Korean peasant wear never designed for ceremony. The tea houses he built were small, deliberately modest, entered through a door so low that any samurai had to bow, had to leave his sword outside, had to arrive on his knees in order to pass through. The equality of the low door, the humility required to enter, the rough bowl that had not been designed for elegance but had acquired through use and time and the accumulated warmth of many hands, a beauty that the lacquered display pieces, perfect in their original form, unused, preserved from encounter, simply could not match.
Rikyū was eventually ordered to commit ritual suicide by Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the most powerful man in Japan, in 1591. The reasons are disputed, political, possibly personal, but there is something philosophically appropriate about the fact that the man who taught the beauty of the impermanent met an impermanent end, and that the teaching survived everything else. There are 3 qualities of Wabi-Sabi that I want to name with care, because they are not aesthetic preferences, they are philosophical positions about the nature of reality that, absorbed genuinely, change how you see everything. The first is impermanence. Wabi-Sabi begins from the Buddhist recognition that nothing lasts, that every form, the flower, the bowl, the body, the relationship, the civilization, is in the process of becoming something else. That the condition of all existing things is the condition of the flower 2 days after its peak, the leaf 3 weeks into autumn, the face 20 years into the life it has been living. The Western aesthetic, in most of its forms, fights this, tries to preserve the peak, the flower at maximum bloom, the face at maximum youth, the achievement at the moment of arrival, and treats everything that follows as a falling away from what should have been held. Wabi-Sabi does the opposite, finds the beauty specifically in the process of change, in the flower as it turns, in the leaf as it colors, in the face as it accumulates the marks of everything it has been present for, not in spite of the impermanence, in the impermanence itself. The second quality is incompleteness. The Japanese aesthetic concept of ma, negative space, the gap, the pause, the part of the composition that contains nothing, is central to Wabi-Sabi. The garden that leaves room, the arrangement that does not fill every space, the conversation that leaves something unsaid, not because the saying would be wrong, but because the not saying is part of the meaning. Western aesthetics, in most of their forms, completes, fills the space, arrives at the resolution, provides the final chord, finishes the sentence. Wabi-Sabi trusts the incompleteness,
understands that the thing not completed, the garden that has room to grow, the poem with the line not written, the life still in process, is more honest about what it actually is than the version that has been finished into a false conclusion. You are not finished. The life you are living is not finished. The incompleteness is not a deficiency. It is the most accurate description of what you actually are.
The third quality is the irregular. The tea bowls that Rikyū preferred were almost never symmetrical. The gardens of the Wabi-Sabi tradition are never perfectly balanced. The tokonoma, the alcove in a Japanese tea room where a single work of art is displayed, traditionally holds one thing, imperfectly placed, asymmetrically positioned, with the deliberate intention that the eye find in the imperfect placement the specific, irreplaceable quality of something that did not need to be arranged. The irregular is honest. The perfectly symmetrical object announces that it has been worked on, that hands have been applied to it with the intention of improving it past its natural form. The irregular object announces that it simply is what it is. And in the tradition of Wabi-Sabi, the thing that simply is what it is, without the anxiety of perfection, without the labor of improvement, without the constant self-monitoring of the thing that has been arranged rather than simply placed, is the most beautiful thing in the room. Now, the bridge. Because Wabi-Sabi is not merely an aesthetic tradition, it is a philosophical position about how to live, specifically about how to live in a body that ages, in a world that changes, with a history that is written indelibly into the surface of the self and cannot be polished away. Most of us are living inside a culture that treats the marks of living as problems, the aging face, the imperfect career, the relationship that has its fractures, the life that has not achieved the original design. Each of these, in the dominant aesthetic of achievement and optimization and the relentless project of self-improvement, is something to be worked on, corrected, returned as closely as possible to the unmarked original. Wabi-Sabi says the marks are the point. The face that has laughed and grieved and been outside in all weathers is not the failed version of the 25-year-old face. It is the accomplished version. It has been somewhere. It has the beauty that only somewhere produces. The career that took unexpected turns, that has its periods of disruption and its evidence of having been tested, is not the failed version of the linear ascent that the plan described. It is the real version, the one that encountered the actual world and has the marks to prove it was actually there. The life that has been lived, imperfectly, impermanently, with its incompleteness and its asymmetries and its visible repairs, is not the consolation prize. In the Wabi-Sabi understanding, it is the masterpiece. Here is what Wabi-Sabi asks of you, practically, today. First, find the beautiful imperfection. Once today, once with genuine attention rather than performed appreciation, find one thing in your immediate world that is imperfect and beautiful because of the imperfection. Not the famous sunset, not the obviously beautiful thing, the chipped mug that has been in the kitchen for 15 years, the scar on your hand from the accident 2 decades ago, the tree in the yard that grew asymmetrically toward the light and is therefore a different shape than trees are supposed to be, and more beautiful for the growing. The face of the person you love, with every year they have lived, visible in it. Look at it with Wabi-Sabi eyes. The imperfection is not the problem, it is the record, and the record, what beauty, honestly seen, actually is. Second, stop one restoration project. There is something in your life, a part of yourself, a relationship, a circumstance that you have been trying to restore to its original unmarked condition, to polish back to the surface it had before the encounter that marked it. Identify it,
And consider, with Wabi-Sabi's clear-eyed, completely unromantic honesty, whether the restoration is serving the thing or serving the anxiety about the mark. The mark is not always beautiful. Sometimes damage is damage and repair is the right response. Wabi-Sabi is not the philosophy of the person who refuses all repair in the name of authenticity. It is the philosophy of the person who knows the difference between the repair that restores function and the polish that deliberately tries to erase the evidence that the thing was ever, anywhere at all. Stop the erasing. Let the record stay. Third, practice ma. Once this week, in a conversation, in a piece of work, in the arrangement of a space you inhabit, deliberately leave something unfinished. Leave the gap, the pause, the space that does not need to be filled. In conversation, the silence after you have said the important thing that does not immediately proceed to the next important thing. In work, the version submitted before it has been polished into the smoothness that removes every trace of the person who made it. In a room, the arrangement that leaves space, that trusts the eye to complete what the arrangement deliberately leaves open.
Notice what the incompleteness contains, what the gap holds, what the space that is not filled makes possible that the filled version would have prevented. Fourth, receive one aging thing with full appreciation. Your own face, your own hands, the body that has been carrying you through the decades and wearing in its surfaces the evidence of what those decades contained. Look at it, once this week, briefly, with genuine attention, through Wabi-Sabi eyes. Not the eyes of the culture, which will see what needs to be corrected. The eyes of the tea master, who picks up the rough, asymmetrical, time-marked bowl and sees in it the record of all the hands that held it, and finds that record more beautiful than anything the potter's original intention could have produced. This is your bowl. These are your marks. This is the specific, unrepeatable, completely honest record of a life that has been somewhere. The somewhere is the beauty. The marks are the gold, and the bowl is complete. I want to close with a moment from the life of Sen no Rikyū, a story told in the tradition about the garden and the view. Rikyū had a student who was learning the tea ceremony and who had been asked to clean the garden. The student cleaned it meticulously, every fallen leaf removed, every pebble placed precisely, every surface swept. He called his teacher to inspect. Rikyū looked at the garden, said nothing for a moment, then walked to a tree at the edge of the garden and shook it gently. A few leaves fell, the specific, random, completely unplanned scattering of leaves falling in the way that leaves fall. He said, "Now it is ready." The garden that had been swept perfectly was beautiful. The garden with the fallen leaves was alive. Not messiness, not the abandonment of care, the specific, deliberate, philosophically serious addition of the irregular, of the imperfection that announced that this garden was part of a world that included weather and seasons and the falling of things that were ready to fall. The tea master shook the tree, stood back, looked at the leaves on the clean ground, asymmetrical, impermanent, completely unrepeatable, and said the only true thing, "Now it is ready. Now it is beautiful." The leaves are going to fall anyway. They always fall. They have always been falling. The question Wabi-Sabi asks, the only question it has ever asked, is whether you can see the falling as the beauty it has always been. Here is the question Wabi-Sabi leaves us with today. Not from the perfect garden, from the garden with the leaves,
From the tea master standing back, looking at the imperfect thing and saying the most countercultural sentence in the history of aesthetics. What mark, what imperfection, what evidence of encounter in your life, in your face, in your work, in the career that took the turns it took, in the relationships that have their visible repairs, have you been trying to polish away that is, in honest and careful looking, the most beautiful thing about you? And what becomes possible in how you see yourself, in how you inhabit the life that is actually yours, when you let the leaves stay where they fell and call it ready? Leave that in the comments, because that answer, your Wabi-Sabi answer, imperfect and honest and completely your own, is not a small thing. It is the bowl, with its marks, with its repairs, with its history, visible in the surface. Now it is ready. Now it is beautiful. I'll see you in the next one.